Most people believe container growing is a modern compromise, something invented for balconies and limited space. But, history tells a different story. Long before plastic pots and sterile substrates, ancient gardeners used enclosed growing systems made of clay, wood and stone. What made these systems thrive was not the container itself, but what lived beneath the surface. Worms were deliberately cultivated inside confined soil spaces to create what we would now call a self-regulating underground ecosystem. These systems produced growth that often outperformed open ground, not because of added inputs, but because of constant biological activity. Worm world was not an accident, it was a controlled strategy. Ancient growers understood that worms turn static soil into a living engine. Soil without worms compacts, suffocates and stagnates, especially in containers. Ancient farmers observed that wherever worms were active, roots spread faster, water moved more evenly, and plants resisted stress. Worms were not seen as helpers, but as workers, constantly grinding organic matter into plant-ready nutrients while keeping soil aerated. In container systems, this mattered even more. Limited space meant limited error. By introducing worms, growers ensured continuous soil movement without digging or turning. The result was loose, oxygen-rich soil that stayed biologically active even in small volumes. Worm castings were valued more than manure because they never burned roots. Historical records from Roman villa gardens and later monastic systems describe worm castings as safe fertility, even for young plants. Unlike raw manure, worm castings release nutrients slowly and evenly. They contain beneficial microbes, enzymes and plant hormones that stimulate root branching. To apply this today, the goal is not to add castings occasionally, but to produce them constantly. This means creating conditions where worms live permanently in the container. A small number of red wigglers or local compost worms is sufficient. What matters is habitat, not quantity. The underground trick was layering soil so worms controlled nutrient flow. Ancient container systems relied on vertical layers. Heavier material stayed below, lighter organic matter above, and living roots moved between. Worms travelled freely through these layers, dragging organic particles downward and pushing mineral-rich castings upward. A modern version begins with a drainage base that still allows worm movement. Above this, place a mineral soil layer mixed with aged compost. The upper layer should contain partially decomposed organic matter such as leaf mould or fermented plant waste. Worms naturally shuttle nutrients between layers, preventing build-up or depletion in any single zone. Worm activity actually replaced the need for frequent watering and feeding in confined soil. One reason ancient containers were so successful was their clever approach to moisture regulation. Worm tunnels function like capillaries, pulling water upward and allowing any excess to drain away. This, in turn, stabilized moisture levels and reduced stress on the roots. To support all this, containers really must never be allowed to dry out completely. Historical systems always emphasize consistent moisture, but not saturation. A lightly mulched surface helps reduce evaporation and, gives worms a reason to remain active near the top, where they process fresh organic matter. Seasonal feeding kept worm populations stable rather than, letting them explode out of control. Ancient growers were careful to avoid overfeeding their worms. Too much fresh material would cause anaerobic pockets and throw things out of balance. Instead, feeding followed seasonal rhythms. Small amounts of organic matter were added regularly, often pre-fermented or partially broken down. In modern containers, this can be replicated by, burying small portions of kitchen scraps or fermented plant matter beneath the surface every few weeks. Always cover completely. Worms will process the material gradually, converting waste into fertility without odour or pest attraction. Container roots grew differently because worms shaped their path. Roots in worm-active soil grow thicker, more branched, and more resilient. Worm tunnels guide roots downward and outward, preventing circling and compaction. This is especially important in containers, where root binding is, pretty common. Historical accounts describe plants lifted from containers with soil clinging tightly to roots, a sign of healthy microbial glue produced by worm activity. This structure protects roots during heat, cold, and transplanting. Worm World also protected containers from disease and nutrient collapse. Worm-rich soil hosts beneficial microbes that outcompete pathogens. This reduced the need for intervention. Ancient growers rarely sterilized soil because they relied on biological balance instead of cleanliness. Modern container failures often come from these sterile mixes that just collapse once the nutrients are depleted. But worm systems, they regenerate fertility continuously, turning containers into, closed-loop ecosystems rather than just disposable growing media. So, why does Worm World remain one of the most powerful tools for resilient container growing? What ancient growers understood was really simple, but actually quite profound. Soil is not just a material, it is, in fact, a community. Worms are the architects of that community, especially in confined spaces. Container growing does not fail because of space. It fails because life is excluded. Restoring worms restores movement, balance, and long-term productivity. This isn't some shortcut. It's honestly a return to a method that worked precisely because it respected natural processes. If this deep historical knowledge changes how you see containers and soil, do consider subscribing to HydroHaven for more enduring techniques rooted in real agricultural history. And please share this guide with those who want growth that lasts beyond just one season.